Hey guys, what's going on? I appreciate you joining me today for a quick Bitcoin update. And I'm making some moves due to my quantitative coin selection model. I'm buying a few and I'm selling a couple. So I figured I will give you guys an update. It's been a pretty crazy day. Watched college football. My team won earlier in the day, so that was good. And I've been watching some as the day has gone by. Just finished up with Stanford and Oregon. It was a pretty crazy game itself. So uh, now here I am talking some crypto. So first I will switch some screens and we can talk some Bitcoin. I'm actually fairly bullish right now, which many of you probably are not too surprised. But I just got Binance up because I was trading some altcoins before, so keeps it pretty easy for me. But for most of you, I am always net long Bitcoin. Why? I'm very bullish in the long run, and I know market timing is very difficult. So I try to diversify myself across many different methodologies. And one methodology is pretty simple: is keep it simple, stupid. Uh, Bitcoin is probably going to go 20,000, 30, 40, 50, 100,000 over the next 2, 3, 5 years. That's a tremendous return. So don't overthink it type thing. But within that framework, I still go a little bit longer, and sometimes I take a little bit off the table. But right now, I'm basically neutral by and large. However, I'm seeing a much more clear path, upward in the near term. I've told you guys before, I'm pretty bullish in the fourth quarter, but I think that is coming up pretty quick, to be honest with you. And I'll show you why. Again, this is Binance, not the greatest charts, but one thing, I am not the best technician on the planet. I don't pretend to be. I take a lot of this data and I crunch the numbers. That's kind of my skill set, not necessarily looking at the chart, itself. However, I do have a bit of a background in that too, so we can dive right into it. In terms of what I'm doing here, I want to stick with a little bit longer dated charts, one day, you can even say a week, 6 hours, 12 hours is probably okay too, but nothing ultra short term. To be honest with you, I'm building the model right now for Bitcoin that should help with the ultra short term. But what am I seeing in the one day that's kind of attractive? So if we just look at volume, you could see the big day we had a couple of days ago. And that's the biggest candle period in terms, I mean, not necessarily candle, but volume that we've had in a couple of weeks. And it was a big up day, very green. So that's very positive. You could see, we had a little down here. The volume in the red is not nearly as large. And what is really telling to me, if you go back like 4 or 5 days ago, we had a big dump here. See it right here, this red candle. The volume wasn't nearly as big as what we saw in the green candle a couple days back. Therefore, that's a pretty big tell to me that there's much more buying power here. People want to buy much more than they want to sell. I mean, you can even go back a few days before that, and you had a pretty sizable green candle there, and you even had more buying power, more volume, green volume there than you did in this big red dump. Okay, so clearly the volume to me is pointing towards, upward. Now, I think this is like I'll give you kind of PSA here. People often attribute the entire volume here to either red or green, and that's not really what you should do. So if you can tell what I just did, I looked at candles that were primarily all up or all down, so then you can kind of get a good sense. But if you look at a candle like this right here, where basically it opened and closed at the same spot, had long wicks both ways, it's slightly red. Well, the reality is this red volume here is not really all red. It's basically purple. I don't know what green and red actually make, but it's neither. It was a flat day. The volume was flat. But either way, here we're seeing definite positive on the volume side. That's pretty bullish. MACD's getting a little bit better too. RSI is not bad. So to me, that's a pretty solid sign. And also, I guess maybe I have a little bit of confirmation bias in me, but I think fourth quarter is going to be pretty strong for a variety of reasons. So I can see us inching our way up there. If we go back really long dated here, 1 week, goes back to my entire theory. We've been ranging for a long time here. Whether even if you want to start here, got a little bit higher, but we've just been cycling. Okay. And this low here, and I think when you look at it from a 1 week standpoint, you don't get caught in the whole 6,100 is different than 5,900 versus 5,750 versus 6,120, all that bullshit. It's all basically the same thing for all intents and purposes. And you can actually see it pretty well here, where it's basically the exact same low, give or take a few wicks piercing it here and there. It's held pretty strong. And given that we're finally starting to see, I didn't show it in 1 day, but we're starting to see some solid moving average crossovers, things moving upward on us. So the trend is beginning to turn positive. It's nowhere near as much of a bearish story as you even had a week ago, let alone 2 or 3 weeks ago, where a lot of things painted bear. Now it's painting neutral to bullish, plus you have a lot of good signs in the future. And if you flip to like something like 6 hour, here, you're still looking at solid MACD, slightly overbought, but I don't necessarily get too worried about that. But even here, you can kind of look at like, for example, here, this red dump here, in this green. I mean, you're seeing, to me at least, a lot more buying power just looking at this this volume path here. And you can see like I'm trying to point out a couple. I haven't looked at this for like about an hour or two, so I'm trying to readjust my eyes here. But overall, things are looking pretty good. Now, I'm not telling you to buy hoping to get a pop to 67.75, who, if that's what you're looking for, will probably hit 67.75 and 66.75 over the next 12 hours. So you can probably make money both ways. So that's not what I'm trying to tell you here, but I'd feel pretty good in the next week or two that we are up from here. I think that's to me, that's certainly better than coin flip right now. So that's much better than where we were a week ago or 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, where the odds were certainly we'd be going down. So anyways, so flipping back to, yeah, green and red, yellow. Sorry, I am not a artist by any stretch. I was way off when I was going purple. My bad. So just kind of flipping gears a little bit to, it's me again, to the quant model. So what am I seeing today? So I'll flip over here. Basically, I'm making quite a bit of moves, and I'll walk you through why. I'm selling, or probably sold by now, some litecoin and some ethos, and I'll show you why. And I'm actually buying a few coins as well. And actually, at this point, I have a pretty healthy mix in my bag, which is fine by me. And what I like here, and I'm very excited, is a lot of very liquid coins in my top 10%, which isn't always the case. And I actually don't like jumping into illiquid coins. I kind of get stuck. Even something like Pundi, which I like the project, it's not illiquid, but it's such a low sat coin. It's kind of a pain in the ass to get in and out. I hate that. The Pundi's number 2 on my list. I own a very healthy bag. I have. Very excited for that. But there's a few other, especially bigger Binance coins that popped up. So, if OneChain, Nebulous, you have HShare, but that's pretty illiquid, so I'm not buying it given my other options. You have iost, which I am buying, currently buying qtum as well. I actually have owned some self-key from a few days ago, NEM from a while ago. I'm still holding on to that. So that's one concern people have, is like, might have high turnover. I've owned NEM for a few weeks now, just chilling. It's doing fine. It's not mooning or anything, but it's low volatility. It's protecting me and it's giving me some appreciation, which honestly sometimes you know, you don't need to be the cheetah to win the race. You can be the turtle. I don't even know how that goes anymore. Been a long time. But anyways, so I'm buying those guys, and I'll kind of, you know, point out some reasons why. In terms of what I'm selling, you can see actually as I scroll down some coins that I still own. So, you know, populous here, 15th percentile. I have no problem with that. You have nexus here, 25th percentile. Still own that. Coin here, 28th. I'll still hold that. And none of these coins I necessarily have to sell down here, but maybe I'm just feeling excited and I want to flip some better coins. See Litecoin here. Generally, what I tell people is I typically sell less than 50th percentile. Like I'll buy in the top 10 or top 25, and I'll let them drift down to about the 50th and below. So Litecoin isn't quite to the bottom here to where I would sell it, but I figured I would start to trim it. And actually, I sold the whole thing. Actually, I think I got some pretty good execution, so I'm pretty happy about that. But I'm also trimming some ethos too. Kind of popped a little bit too, so I want to trim that. That was one of my top bags. So I still own it and will own it, but taking a lot off the table. OMG too. I trimmed a little bit, I think earlier, very, very early in the day. And ontology too. I trimmed a bit. Sometimes when I've been sneaking over 3,100, I've been taking a little bit, but I still have a little bit of a bag for ethos, ontology, and oh my's go. But Litecoin, I'm out. So basically, I have a fair amount of capital to deploy, and that's where I pushed it right into the on-chain, iost, and qtum overall. But like I mentioned in my Twitter feed, I still own a bunch of these coins. So I own Pundi, I mentioned Selfkey, Nem, Populous, like I mentioned, bytecoin, which is a little bit further down, aeternity I still own, coin. I know I mentioned some of these before. I know I'm missing a few as I'm scrolling down, but I probably own, give or take, 10 or 11 coins now, I believe. So I'm pretty content. Kind of show you why I'm owning some of these guys. Yeah, okay, just want to make sure my screen's showing up pretty decent. So WAN. So why do I like this guy? It's third percentile of my model. Its momentum is fairly decent, so it's done pretty good over the past couple of weeks. You know, it hasn't really pumped in this most recent move. Has a lot in terms of valuation. It can still move quite a bit, so there's still some dry powder, and it's a low risk coin. So I know a lot of people don't attribute alts with low risk, but the reality is some have much more volatility than others. So it's good to differentiate. So overall, it's looking pretty good. I'll flip over to Binance in a second. Pundi, I know I've owned this for a while, but the key here to me with Pundi is it just has a lot of upside potential. If you look at its value, this is a coin that can just, you know, go from 22, 23 sats to 30, 40, probably pretty quick, to be honest with you. So it's a nice upside bag to have. The fundamentals are pretty good on the other side. And it hasn't pumped at all. It really hasn't moved from 21, 22 for some days. If you guys follow my Twitter, I was kind of getting pissed off because I had an order at 21 sats for like 5 days, and it kept sneaking down to 21. I was not getting a fill at all. I was getting really frustrated, but good news, I finally got a fill, so I was pretty happy with that. So that's with that not ride and kind of see what happens. qtum, here you can actually see doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of positives here, but the reality is sometimes that's all you need. I think one thing that's been happening too is kind of big caps have been moving. So what I call live, which is not just being big cap, but also showing a lot of volume for especially your cap. So qtum's been showing that. It has some upside and has some momentum, but really no red flags. But really, I want to point out like Ripple XRP. So I've actually owned it for a while. I sold it. I made a Periscope video, looked pretty stupid. just like my Bitcoin is the Bcash video. If you haven't watched that, check it out. It's pretty stupid, maybe a little funny. I had fun. That's what it's all about. But XRP probably looked pretty stupid selling it around whatever it was, 5,100 sats. But I had good reason, following the model. And the reality is sometimes things keep pumping, and that's a-okay because most of the times they do not. So this is what's interesting. So XRP is one of the worst coins in the model. Now, obviously, in terms of keeping track of performance and things like that, I'm not going to take it out by any stretch. So the model is going to have to live with whatever XRP does in the bottom 10 percentile. However, I wouldn't necessarily short it. This is where it's very important. If you can, it's not necessarily mandatory, but if you can combine multiple different ways of managing money. So if you can combine some technical analysis with some quantitative analysis, with some fundamental analysis, you'll be much better off than if you can just use one at a time. So this is a prime example. So XRP obviously has the Swell conference coming up. The fundamentals are looking pretty good. You had, I don't even know, some famous singers. I think Justin Bieber's manager tweet about it. There's a lot of stuff going on. So with that, even though it screams reversal, it should tank, because that's typically what these type of coins do at this point in time. I wouldn't just go all in on that blindly because of all the other stuff that's going on. So that's where it's really important to kind of diversify amongst your process. However, if you want to look at coins that might tank, that do not have Justin Bieber, whomever it was, his manager, tweeting about it, be something like TNT. We've seen that, pop pretty recently as well. Not as much as Ripple, but it's kind of like been right behind it if you looked at the Binance top coins. So that would be much more likely to fall. So just, another way to take a look at it. Okay, I got a question. Do I have a bot to accumulate my new buys, or do I do it manually? Right now, I actually do it manually, mainly because I like to control that process. I made a video on the problems with the bid-ask spread, and a lot of these coins are pretty illiquid. Now, the ones I'm buying now are not. They're okay. And Litecoin is pretty liquid as well. So not really many problems there. I probably could have used a bot if I wanted to. But a lot of these coins have such wide spreads. I just don't really trust a bot to get decent execution. So I think there's a bit of an art. And you're coming from a guy, I get accused all the time for just being way too systematic and quantitative. But in reality, there is some art. So, I take a look at the bid-ask spread. I take a look at where it's ranked in my model and how anxious I am to get executed. And that could be a function too of how much Bitcoin I'm holding. So I want this part of my portfolio to be pretty much fully invested. I don't want that much Bitcoin. So if there's cases where, I might have a market order where most people probably wouldn't do a market order. That's because I want to get filled. I want to reduce my Bitcoin amount. I want to make sure I have that alt exposure. That's something a bot necessarily couldn't pick up automatically. That being said, especially if once I do finish my Bitcoin model, and by that I mean it's going to be Bitcoin in or out type thing, where it's going to be, okay, crypto markets are most likely to go down tomorrow or down the next week. So let's short it or take off some exposure. I'll be much more likely to use a bot there. The reason is because that's much more straightforward. You're not going to have as much nuance. And the bid-ask spread is obviously for Bitcoin is very narrow. So you don't have to worry about getting, piss poor execution like you would on some of these coins. Hopefully that answers your question. All right, so let me flip back over to hi again. Thanks for joining me, by the way. I certainly appreciate the people that Bitcoin moved up a little bit. I'm a genius. I'm kidding. As you know, I would say a $20 move in Bitcoin is completely, totally, and 100% meaningless. But it's always nice. I'd rather it go up than down, put it that way. So let's look at some of these buys. So for my model, I'm generally going in and out of Bitcoin. So I'm usually buying. I'm not buying through Tether generally, but this is a case where qtum has a pretty tight spread. So you fit 568 and 570. So here, for me, a bot wouldn't be that big of a deal, especially if it's a pretty naive bot that would just like market order. But I'm not a whale by any stretch, but I'm not the smallest fish in the sea either. So, I mean, I'm fairly small fish, but not with some of these coins. If you put in a 0.25 Bitcoin order, you're eating up a lot of the order book. And I mean, I don't typically, honestly, put in 0.25 Bitcoin orders. That's bigger than what I am, especially since I spread my bets out. So you got to be really cautious in how big the order book is too, especially with bots. But qtum here, I mean, you can see this is the 6 hour. I mean, frankly, I really like this in terms of, where we stand, especially with the quant model. I mean, you're seeing a lot of up and down volatility. We're, closer to the bottom of the range. Frankly, it's a screaming goodbye. A lot of coins similar to it they've actually moved a bit too. A couple of days ago, some of the kind of the bigger caps. Well, so you have like the EOSs and etc. ADA, I mean, they moved a bit, so it's not a ton, but something as low vol as qtum and those big guys, if you can just outperform by a handful of percent, that's certainly a good sign. Let's actually pull up pundi here. So pundi basically hasn't moved at all ever. Feels like, yeah. Don't even worry about the chart necessarily, but I mean, this is the tricky part with such a low sat coin, and especially if you want to use a bot, to be honest with you, because you really have to make a judgment call. So when I put my orders in for 21 sats before, I already had a healthy bag. So this is where the art comes in. I didn't necessarily need that exposure to pundi, where something like qtum recently today, I sold a bunch of Litecoin. I had a bunch of Bitcoin to spend. qtum had a fairly narrow spread. I wanted to get in, so I was far more aggressive with my my bid. But something like this is another prime example. Since it's so hard to get filled with your limit orders, here, if you really want to get filled, you're going to have to go with a market order. I mean, there's just two ways about it. So you have to have that art. So if you just have like I could easily, I think it's called shrimpy. I could put in my allocations, which pretty straightforward, set it and forget it. But I want to control the execution a little bit. But either way, pundi's a pretty good coin. I'm pretty excited about it. I actually think it's going to have a pretty solid week coming up, especially if, honestly, either way, if the market tanks, I don't necessarily think pundi's going to go up. However, I do expect it to hold its value far better than everything else. And if the market starts moving up, feeling pretty good about pundi right here. Anyways, I know I'm getting kind of long in the tooth here. It's supposed to be a quick update. But anyways, guys, I appreciate you joining me. Check out my stupid video about Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. You can see I can joke around very terribly occasionally. But anyways, I appreciate it, and have a great Sunday. Thanks.